Mbak? Oke ya.
Aduh, Bapak Lima.
Oke Mbak. Mbak Yanti.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us all. Your Excellency, Speaker, Vice Speaker, and honorable members of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, Your Excellency, Chairman of Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption, or GOPAC, Honorable President of Southeast Asia Parliamentarians Against Corruption, or Seapac, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We would like to extend our heartiest welcome to all distinguished guests to the opening ceremony of the webinar co-organized by the Southeast Asia Parliamentarians Against Corruption, or Seapac, and the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia. Our gratitude and appreciation to all excellencies and distinguished guests who are tuning in to this virtual event live via YouTube and streaming via Parliament TV channel. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, remarks by His Excellency, Chairman of Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption, or GOPAC.
Excellencies, honorable distinguished guests, I am honored to have the opportunity to deliver opening remark in this Southeast Asia Parliamentarian Against Corruption Seapac information webinar on the 2021 UN General Assembly special session against corruption. I feel blessed that several regional chapters of GOPAC have been in a very active state, including Seapac. I should congratulate Dr. Zone and Seapac executives as well as its secretariat for convening this momentous event. This year, GOPAC will have the opportunity to take part in the upcoming UN General Assembly session with an umbrella topic that is pertinent to our work. Upon my election as the chairman of the organization in the 2019, I have a mission to expand and elevate the visibility of GOPAC on par with those other international organizations. I have designed several agendas, including building partnerships with the United Nations to speak with the Secretary General himself for further collaboration, and the Inter-Parliamentary Union, among others. I have already established a secretariat office in Doha so that GOPAC staffers can exercise their work at best. Only due to the COVID-19 pandemic, mobility is halted. However, we cannot let the pandemic hampering us down. We will move forward, engage, and deliver more actions and programs this year. Excellency, honorable distinguished guests, as an international parliamentarian network holding a special consultative status with the UN, ECOSOC, GOBAC has the opportunity to deeply engage with the UN agenda. We even involve in the preparation meeting for the UNGASS. GOBAC has already submitted its parliamentarians dimension contribution to UN General Assembly session with the expectation to shape its outcome. The political declaration, the outcome of the political declaration. But our roles should not stop there. As parliamentarians, we have a duty to hold the government to account. Our people, we have a duty to hold the governments to account. Our people all upon us to watch their money being spent and to ensure that it delivers to those who are needed the most. We have a future responsibility to secure generations, years to come, and enable them to live just and prosperous. Aside from that, as international and regional parliamentarians networks, GOBAC and Seapac have the power to drive the national and international landscape against corruption. Therefore, I encourage you to use your constitutional mandate for the good and our values. Explore the uncharted territory of the anti-corruption international regime. Voice a better change in the ways of our international community act against corruption. That is what GOBAC fight for. Make that your fight as well. Excellencies, honorable distinguished guests, GOBAC thanks Seapac and other regional chapters for advocating more knowledge for parliamentarians, providing numerous tools to advance the legislators' works and connection network for peer support and shared experiences. This Seapac information webinar, UN General Assembly webinar, is a preparatory step for parliamentarians for devising more action of what to come after the 2021 UN General Assembly Special. GOBAC stand ready to support Seapac and other regional chapters for that purpose. After all, our very foundation network comes from you, the members and regional chapters. Let this be a successful endeavor for tomorrow's future. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now kindly invite Honorable President of Southeast Asia Parliamentarians Against Corruption, or Seapac, Dr. Fadli Zon.
Excellency Chair of GOPEC, His Excellency Ahmad bin Abdullah bin Zayed Al Mahmud, Excellency Speaker of the House of Republic of Indonesia, Ibu Puan Maharani, Honorable Vice Chairs and distinguished members of Committee for Interparliamentary Cooperation, Honorable members of Parliament from Seapac members countries, Mr. Francesco Ceci, UNODC Regional Advisor on Anti-Corruption, Ms. Hajah Suhana binti Haji Sudin, Director of Brunei Darussalam Anti-Corruption Bureau, ASEAN PAC Representative, Mr. Muhammad Hadiana, Deputy for Information and Data, Indonesian Corruption Eradication Commission, KPK, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon us all. A very good morning. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this Seapac information webinar entitled The UNGASS Against Corruption 2021. What roles are there for parliamentarians? My apology to all Seapac members, for we cannot have any meeting or program implemented last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic and national restriction situation. This year is no different, I suppose. There is still a lot of uncertainty on what might happen regarding the pandemic. Yet, we cannot stand for another excuse. Our network should deliver, as I believe that the success in the fight against corruption also depends on the way we work and collaborate in the region. CPAC is a platform for us, parliamentarians, to work together, collaborate, and advocate means to combat corruption and promote good governance at the regional level. As an international parliamentarian network, we have the opportunity to bring together our best practices, experiences, and voices of our people and bring about a change in the way we combat corruption. Excellencies, honorable distinguished guests, CPAC believes that parliamentarians have the key roles to combat corruption through their constitutional parliamentary mandates. These roles are becoming of greater significance lately due to the COVID-19 pandemic responses. I know that there are challenges in the exercise of our parliamentary duties during the emergency, but to hold the government to account, to legislate needed legal framework within adequate protection to prevent the misuse of public money and corruption, and to save, defend, and ensure that the public money delivered to those who are needed the most are must-do jobs for a parliamentarian. Today's webinar is one of the many means of networking that CPAC can exercise during this hard time. This year's activity will be started by a topical information webinar about an international event, the UN General Assembly Special Session Against Corruption, UNGASS, as agreed by the UNGA General Assembly through a resolution 73-191, the UN will convene in the first half of 2021 a General Assembly Special Session Against Corruption. It will discuss challenges and measures to prevent and combat corruption and strengthen international cooperation. I believe UNGASS provides a stronger political impetus for the global anti-corruption movement. It is critical as we, for this past year, have been dealing with massive delivery of public money and programs specifically designed to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and recover from the resulting impact of such crisis. But most of the time, many UN international agendas reserve only to the executives, while parliamentarians, as people who receive mandates and voices of the people, are left behind. CPAC believes that we should not leave anyone behind. Under GOPAC, the Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption, we do have already contributed to the discussion for UNGASS. But we know that the more parliamentarians join the discussion, the more we can achieve. The more they know much about the UNGASS, the best we can prepare for actions beyond UNGASS. Excellencies, distinguished guests, this information webinar is open for all parliaments and parliamentarians within the Southeast Asia region. It is not exclusively only for GOPAC, Seapac members, with the hope that after this webinar, you will have more insight on the agenda and set actions to follow up or to prepare priorities for the UNGASS. I know that we still have much to do, but this is a small step for a greater one. I hope that the webinar will be fruitful and deliberative. For those who have not yet a member, I encourage you, my fellow parliamentarians, to join GOPAC CPAC membership. Let us collaborate for a better region free from corruption. Join us and be our ally. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, speech by Her Excellency Speaker of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, Dr. Honoris Causa Puan Maharani.
His Excellency Ahmad bin Abdullah bin Zaid Al Mahmud, Chair of GOPAC and Speaker of Qatar Surah Council, Honorable Dr. Fadilzon, Chair of Seapac, Honorable Bapak Mardani Alisera, Secretary of Seapac, Honorable Members of Parliament of Southeast Asian countries, distinguished panelists. It gives me a great pleasure to address you at the webinar on the United Nations General Assembly's Special Session Against Corruption 2021. What role are there for parliamentarians? Since its establishment, Southeast Asian Parliamentarians Against Corruption has served as a network to promote good governance and anti-corruption partnership among parliamentarians in this region. Corruption can occur anywhere. It mainly hits the poor, the weak, and the vulnerable. It denies people access to health services, education, and economic opportunities. Therefore, we have to reaffirm and continuously strengthen our effort to fight corruption. It takes years and long journey before one country becomes a mature democracy with solid commitment to good governance and anti-corruption. We should not give up whenever we face the obstacle to reach our objective. As parliamentarians, we have the opportunity to lead this undertaking. We have to demonstrate to our people that we have the determination to implement good governance. At the national level, parliamentarians have a key role to combat corruption by taking up its main function, oversight, legislation, and budgeting. In Indonesia, the House of Representatives also feels the importance of commitment to fight corruption. We empower our parliamentarians to actively contribute addressing this issue, including by joining international cooperation against corruption. At the global level, the effort to fight corruption must go hand in hand with our commitment to achieve sustainable development goals. In June 2021, the United Nations will hold the first ever United Nations General Assembly special session dedicated to anti-corruption. This event will be a momentum for us parliamentarians to show our strong support to the anti-corruption global commitment. Distinguished participants, the world now experiences global turbulence. To face this crisis, many governments spend rapidly and hugely to provide emergency health support and bring economy back on track. As a consequence, this may create potential risks that leads to misuse or mismanagement, corruption present a threat to our immediate response to COVID-19 pandemic and our longer-term recovery program. Therefore, there are several issues that we can consider as our contribution to fight corruption in times of pandemic, among others. First, strengthening oversight to ensure accountability of government when carrying out COVID-19 related program. Second, promoting transparency in our response to COVID-19, such as those related to public procurement. Third, strengthening good governance in public and private sector to enhance integrity in our response to COVID-19. In closing, I hope that this event can be used as a platform to exchange views and share experience on how to combat corruption in light of the UN General Assembly Special Session 2021. Together, we can make positive contribution in fighting corruption and at the same time responding to COVID-19 pandemic in this region. I wish you a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the opening ceremony is concluded, and now we will proceed to the next session. Prior to the discussion with our prominent speakers, we will now have a short video. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to the panel discussion. For this panel discussion, we will have 3 speakers who will share their knowledge, expertise, and views regarding our main topic today, the UN General Assembly Special Session Against Corruption 2021. What role are there for parliamentarians? We are very pleased to have Honorable Secretary of Seapac, Dr. Mardani Ali Sera, as our session moderator. And now I shall pass the floor to our moderator, Dr. Mardani Ali Sera.
Thank you, Mbak Rosita. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Excellency Ahmad bin Abdullah bin Zaid Al Mahmud, Chair of GOPEC, Speaker of the Shura Council of the State of the Qatar, Excellency Dr. Honoris Causa Puan Maharani, Speaker of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, Honorable Dr. Padlizon, Chair of the Committee for Interparliamentary Cooperation of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, and also President of Seapac, Mr. Francesco Cecchi, UN ODC Regional Advisor on Anti-Corruption, Ms. Dayang Hajah Suhana binti Haji Sudin, Director of Brunei Anti-Corruption Institution and ASEAN Parties Against Corruption Representatives, Mr. Muhammad Hadiana, Deputy Head of Indonesia Corruption Eradication Commission for Data and Information, Honorable members of Parliament from Indonesia, Cambodia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Timor-Leste, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining us this morning on the Southeast Asia Parliamentarians Against Corruption Seapac webinar on the UN General Assembly Special Session Against Corruption, UNGASS 2021. With the topic, What Role Are There for Parliamentarians? Initiated by the Committee for Interparliamentary Cooperation of Indonesia, House of Representatives, and Seapac. My name is Mardani Alisera. I'm Vice Chairperson of the Committee for Interparliamentary Cooperation of Indonesian House of Representatives, as well as the Secretary of Seapac. And today I serve as a moderator for this discussion. Distinguished guests and delegates, this is a momentum for us, parliamentarians, to strengthen our commitment in raising awareness and work together in the anti-corruption global movement. As you may be aware, on 2 until 4 June 2021, the United Nations will hold the first General Assembly focused on corruption, namely the UN General Assembly Special Session Against Corruption, or UNGASS. The session will discuss challenges and measures to prevent and combat corruption and strengthen international cooperation. At that special session, a concise and action-oriented political declarations will be adopted upon intergovernmental negotiation process under the auspices of the Conference of the State Parties to the UN Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC. Last week, Transparency International just launched their 2020 Corruption Perception Index. The diverse result of anti-corruption measures that have been implemented in the region can be seen through the index. Based on the Transparency International report, some countries experience slow progress in anti-corruption effort, while others steadily improve their integrity infrastructures. Certainly, more concrete action need to be done to eliminate corruption in our regions. The UNGASS 2021 could be our platform and reference to strengthen Southeast Asian countries' commitment and to propose stronger anti-corruption measures that are currently critical for the region, especially in this pandemic time. The COVID-19 has created opportunities and risks of misuse and mismanagement in the relief mobilization resource. Fellow members of Parliament, we are fortunate today. We have Mr. Francesco Cecchi with us to share his knowledge on the importance of UNGASS 2021. on what role can parliamentarians do to support UNGASS 2021 agenda? Mr. Chessy is UNODC, United Nations Office of Drug and Crimes Anti-Corruption Regional Advisor for Southeast Asia, and has more than 15 years of experience working in an international organization in the area of good governance, public administration, and anti-corruption. His work focused on providing support to member states of the UN Convention Against Corruption for implementation of the convention. He received his BA in Political Science from the University of Pisa, Italy, and a master's degree from the Sorbonne University in Public Administration. The UNODC is a United Nations body mandated to focus and enhance its capacity to address corruption, the guardian of the UN Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, and the organization who is responsible for the UN General Assembly Against Corruption. Therefore, I think it best for us to hear directly from the UNODC about the preparation of the and comprehensive ideas of UNGASS and where parliamentarians can best play their role in delivering parliamentary dimension up to the UNGASS. Before we proceed to the agenda of a panel discussion with Mr. Francesco, please kindly allow me to remind you that the time location for the presentation is 10 to maximum 15 minutes, and we will go to the question and answer session after all three panelists deliver their presentations. Now, without further ado, Mr. Francesco, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Martani. I must say it's a great pleasure for me, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, to speak today on behalf of UNODC in this important event. I wish to thank the Seapac for the invitation, as it is clear that parliamentarians are extremely important for anti-corruption efforts at the national and international levels. So we really value the interest and participation of GOPAC and Seapac in the UN special session of the UN General Assembly dedicated to fighting corruption. I would like to take this opportunity to summarize the work that is being done in preparation to the special session of the General Assembly. The General Assembly decided to convene a special session in December 2018, and countries around the world are preparing for it. On June 1st, 2020, the General Assembly adopted the so-called modalities resolution, which lays out the ways in which the special session is to be prepared. On 31st of August, the Assembly decided to change the date of the special session to the 2nd and 4th of June 2021. As previously, as you may remember, it was set for April. Now, in the UN architecture, the Conference of the State Parties to the UN Convention Against Corruption is the key anti-corruption policy-making body. Accordingly, the General Assembly invited the conference to lead the preparatory process for the special session by addressing all organizational and substantive matters in an open-ended manner, and requested its extended bureau to approve a work plan and timeline for the preparatory process and to appoint two co-facilitators for the informal consultation on the draft political declaration. The co-facilitators appointed by the extended bureau are His Excellency Ambassador Eric Anderson Machado of Peru and His Excellency Ambassador Hamad Al-Kaabi of the United Arab Emirates. In line with the modality resolutions, UNODC is supporting the preparatory process substantively and technically. In preparation for UNGASS, 3 intersessional meetings of the Conference of the State Parties are being held in Vienna to give room for discussion and exchange of ideas. And a lively exchange between state party, international organization, and civil society is taking place. And where a lot of ideas for the outcome of UNGASS are being presented. These meetings usually have a thematic focus and have panel discussion on issues that at the same time are being discussed in the informal consultations. The thematic focus areas were prevention and criminalization at the intersessional meeting that happened in September, asset recovery and international cooperation at the intersessional meeting in mid-November, and there will be a 3rd meeting on the 23rd February 2021 that will cover the issues of the impact of beneficial ownership, transparency, and the role of the private sector in supporting anti-corruption efforts. It will also address the issue of measures to address impunity, including the strengthening of and independence of integrity and oversight bodies, and harnessing the full potential of education and technology in efforts to prevent and combat corruption. The informal outcomes reflecting the discussion at the meetings are being made available at the ungas2021.org website. The expected outcome of the General Assembly special session is, as it was mentioned, a political declaration. Its 0 draft was circulated among delegations on 17th of August 2020. It was prepared by the co-facilitator with our help on the basis of input from state parties to the convention. A special session of the Conference of State Parties to UNCAC will take place on 7th of May 2021. At that session, the conference is expected to approve the draft political declaration and then transmit it to the General Assembly for adoption at the special session in June 2021. A call for input by interest stakeholders was sent last year, seeking contribution to inspire and fit into the drafting process. Many interesting ideas were submitted. They are all available on our ungas2021.org. We received 57 submissions so far from state parties, international organizations, CSOs, academia, and the private sector. GOPAC submitted 2 contributions on the necessity to include Pacific region countries and parliamentarians representative in meaningful deliberations at the UNGASS, and the second one of broader nature, covering the role of parliamentarians, the importance of strong and independent anti-corruption institutions, and the importance of improved stakeholder cooperation in the fight against corruption. On behalf of UNODC, I would like to thank GOPAC for the submission. Additional ideas have been presented at the UNGASS intersessional meetings, as well as at the supporting side events in Vienna. The submission covers a range of issues across all areas of addressing corruption, starting from the international legal architecture to ideas on how to ensure that corruption can be more effectively addressed toward making progresses in achieving the SDGs. Let me give you a brief overview of what topic the submissions cover. A lot of submissions deal with preventive action, such as with prevention strategy and anti-corruption and oversight bodies, to transparency in the financing of candidature of political organization and parties. And this element, I think, is particularly important for parliamentarians, as we are really looking at transparency of political party financing, issues such as conflicts of interest, lobbying, undue pressure for policy making, for decision making. These are all elements that parliamentarians are really well placed to address. Submissions further cover criminalization and law enforcement and means to end impunity, such as measures related to improving capacity of law enforcement agencies or effective cooperation and information exchange between relevant agencies. Several submissions call for a safe and enabling environment and protection measure for those involved in uncovering and enforcing corruption offenses, such as whistleblower, reporting persons, witnesses, investigators, prosecutors, and investigative journalists. So these are all categories that deserve special protection. Many submissions dealing with international cooperation and asset recovery, which primarily seek to make this, the proceeds more efficient and less burdensome. Inter alia, through the suggestion to use and strengthen legal framework and regional, interregional, and international network, and using flexible instruments such as non-conviction based confiscation, as well as simplification of procedures to improve efficiency. We have also received submissions on technical assistance and information sharing, as well as on cross-cutting issues, such as on the use of new technology, the linkages between corruption and gender, and corruption measurement. Finally, some submissions contain innovative and forward-looking new ideas, such as how to address corruption in the response of COVID-19 pandemic. And this has been a topic very much debated last year and this year, as several packages of support against the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic have been introduced, and I refer to in particular Indonesia, but also other countries in the region where billions of dollars are being spent. And it is very important to make sure that these funds are spent without corruption, avoiding risks of fraud, risk of embezzlement, and that the oversight and audit bodies are duly informed, and they have the power to prevent corruption in the disbursement of the funds. And also is very important the role of parliaments, I must say, in this perspective, as implementing bodies, the government, the executive, but also local governments. They have to be requested to report duly to parliaments, and parliaments has to bring forward its oversight function in an effective and efficient manner. So important the role of parliamentarians here, I would say, as well. Going back to the UNGASS suggestions, and there were several suggestions for instrument, mechanisms, and institutions, such as voluntary anti-corruption trust fund to finance technical assistance programs or body to measure the concrete impact of anti-corruption initiatives. The UN has developed a common position, which is the UN system's substantive contribution to the special session of the General Assembly. The common position was developed under the co-leadership of UNODC, the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, and UNDP, within the framework of the Secretary General Executive Committee. The zero draft of the political declaration is structured along the chapters of UNGASS, which was the wish of many of our state parties, The draft is currently still being negotiated in its second hearing. Under the able leadership of the ambassador from UAE and Peru, who co-chaired the informal consultation. As for the timeline, the COSP is scheduled to approve the political declaration on 7th of May and subsequently transmit it to the General Assembly. This is an extremely important process to promote the fight against corruption worldwide. The outcome of UNGASS 2021 could potentially chart a path that promotes innovative, flexible, and forward-looking means to implement the 2030 agenda, in particular SDG 16. We welcome contribution from the civil society and NGOs, and therefore thanks again to GovPac for the interest and contribution that the organization is making to this debate. So I will stop here. Thank you very much for the attention, and I will give back the floor to the host. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Francesco Sesi. It is an honor for all of us to know about the progress on the UNGASS preparations on the next June on 2021, and we'll hope that all the member of parliament can contribute to this UNGASS sessions. And now let we move to our second panelist. I will give the floor to Ms. Haja Suhana binti Haji Sudin, Director of Brunei Anti-Corruption Institutions and ASEAN Parties Against Corruption Representatives. Previously, she worked in the Attorney General Chamber. She received Bachelor of Law from MDX University, Barrister at Law at Lincoln Inn, and Diploma Syariah Law and Practice from University Islam Sultan Sharif Ali. We would like to hear the state of corruption in Southeast Asia and ASEAN PAC during the 2021 UNGASS. Please, Ms. Suhana, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished Excellencies, distinguished representatives of national and international authorities, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, a very good morning. It is my pleasure to address you today in my capacity as the Director of the Anti-Corruption Bureau, Brunei Darussalam, and to represent the ASEAN Parties Against Corruption, ASEAN PAC. Excellencies, we have long recognized that corruption is a scourge that of February 1982, after the establishment of anti-corruption agencies in Singapore and Malaysia. The Bureau has since developed its own Prevention of Corruption Act based on the Singapore Anti-Corruption Law as its references. Over the years, the Bureau has established closer networks and maintained good cooperation with Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Having similarities in legal systems and sharing of borders, all four anti-corruption reached consensus and committed to enhancing the effectiveness in the fight against corruption by strengthening international cooperation. Excellencies, allow me to share the background of ASEAN Parties Against Corruption, ASEAN PAC, a group comprising of ASEAN anti-corruption agencies. The ASEAN PAC was established through the Memorandum of Understanding MOU on cooperation for preventing and combating corruption, which was signed by anti-corruption agencies from Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore on the 15th of December 2004. The grouping was initially referred to as the Memorandum of Understanding between the Anti-Corruption Bureau of Brunei Darussalam, the Corruption Eradication Commission of the Republic of Indonesia, the Anti-Corruption Agency, now known as the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, MACC Malaysia, and the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau of the Republic of Singapore on cooperation for preventing and combating corruption. The MOU set two main objectives, namely, to establish and strengthen collaborative efforts against corruption among the parties and to increase capacity and institutional building among the parties in preventing and combating corruption. In 2007, the Anti-Corruption Unit, ACU of Cambodia, Office of the Ombudsman Philippines, Office of the National Counter-Corruption Commission, now known as the National Anti-Corruption Commission, NACC Thailand, and the Government Inspectorate of Vietnam, GIV, signed the MOU, marking the increase of members to 8 anti-corruption agencies in the region. Excellencies, during the third principals meeting, then known as the third MOU meeting, chaired by the CPIB Singapore 2017, it was proposed that the meeting should consider a new name which should reflect the grouping as a regional Southeast Asia anti-corruption entity. In that connection, the use of the word ASEAN was considered but dropped as not all ASEAN members were parties to the MOU at that time. In view of these considerations, the grouping eventually settled on its current name, Southeast Asia Parties Against Corruption, Seapac. Seapac has then developed and expanded its members to include state inspection authorities, SIAAF Lao PDR in 2010, and the Anti-Corruption Commission of Myanmar. Then in 2014, a proposal was made by the MACC for the Seapac to become an entity under ASEAN, as now all 10 ASEAN anti-corruption agencies has joined Seapac. Seapac successfully became an entity under ASEAN in February 2017. In addition, a webpage dedicated to showcase the work and achievements of ASEAN Pac was developed and maintained by the MACC Malaysia. In 2018, a proposal made by the CPIB Singapore to renaming the Seapac to include the term ASEAN to reflect Seapac's status as an entity associated with the ASEAN and its membership comprising of all 10 countries. Members then agree to rename Seapac to become ASEAN Pac. An unanimous decision was adopted in the principals meeting in Thailand in 2019. Excellencies, ASEAN Pac holds its annual principals and secretariat meetings based on rotation following the host of ASEAN. Since its inception in 2004 and subsequent expansion to include parties across all ASEAN member states, ASEAN Pac has always recognized the importance of establishing and strengthening collaborative efforts against corruption and to increase capacity and institutional building amongst the parties in preventing and combating corruption. These objectives are enshrined in the Memorandum of Understanding signed by all ASEAN Pac members. The current ASEAN Pac Action Plan has also highlighted capacity building programs for officers of ASEAN Pac member agencies to enhance their capabilities as a core work stream. As such, ASEAN Pac has organized some capacity buildings at the margins of its annual and secretariat meetings recently, namely, applying innovative tools in the fight against corruption, organized by the CPIB Singapore in 29th of October 2018, and regional workshop on denying safe haven to corrupt officials and stolen assets organized by NACC Thailand, which was held on the 8th of October 2019. The GIV Vietnam, at the conclusion of our ASEAN Pac Secretariat meeting, informed that the GIV will host another capacity building program this year. Excellencies, the basis of ASEAN Pac formation was to enhance cooperation and render assistance to its members. The objective of ASEAN Pac is in line with the provisions of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, the only legally binding universal anti-corruption instrument. Successful international cooperation is required to eradicate the corrosive effects of corruption. The United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, offers a strong framework for the states to engage in international cooperation at both the informal and the formal levels. One of the central goals of the convention is to promote, facilitate, and support international cooperation in the fight against corruption. Chapter 4 of the convention contains detailed provisions on the main modalities of international cooperation in criminal matters such as extradition, mutual legal assistance, and the transfer of sentenced persons. It also covers law enforcement cooperation, joint investigation, and special investigative techniques. Moreover, the convention in its Article 43 requires state parties to consider assisting each other in investigations of proceedings in civil and in administrative matters where appropriate and consistent with their domestic legal system. In realizing the importance of this provision, ASEAN Pact has recently adopted its ASEAN Pact Action Plan 2020 to 2022 to support and ensure the effective implementation of the UN Convention Against Corruption amongst its members and to support members who are undergoing the review process. Excellencies, in the recent 8th conference of the state parties in Abu Dhabi, the conference has adopted several resolutions, including Resolution 814 on the role of national parliament and other legislative bodies in preventing and combating corruption in all its form. Resolution encourages state parties to strengthen interparliamentary dialogue and cooperation, including in coordination with Inter-Parliamentary Union and similar organizations as appropriate, to promote the exchange of good practices relating to legislation, review, and oversight controls in the fight against corruption, and to consider implementing those good practices in domestic law. The resolution further encourages state parties to recognize the important role of parliaments and other legislative bodies in strengthening the implementation of the convention with a view to effectively preventing and combating corruption in all its forms and preventing money laundering related to corruption by inter alia promoting transparency and accountability in the management of public finances, exercising budget oversight, criminalizing corruption offenses, and facilitating the asset recovery process in accordance to Chapter 5 of the Convention. Excellencies, the first ever special session of the UN General Assembly against corruption, as we know, will be held in June 2021 this year. The UNGASS will provide the international community with a unique opportunity to shape the global anti-corruption agenda for years to come. As we all note that negotiation of the political declaration for UNGASS is ongoing and would at least include the 5 major chapters of the UN Convention and supports the implementation of its relevant resolution. Excellencies, in conclusion, the ASEAN Pact will continue to work together towards closer collaboration with one another to enhance our awareness and resilience against conventional and emerging threats in our fight against corruption. We must also seek to leverage on one another's experience and know-how, and indeed those of other relevant partners in the international anti-corruption community, to strengthen our respective abilities to fight corruption in a more effective and innovative manner to ensure that we stay one step ahead of the corrupt perpetrators. Pac will also continue to collaborate with other international organizations such as the UNODC, ADB, OECD, STAR, and others. Lastly, we also like to express our gratitude for the opportunity and this invitation by Seapac and the House of Representatives Indonesia to share the work and the activities of Pac in the fight against corruption. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Suhana, who reminding us on the Pac activity and the state of art of the institutions. I think it would be better for us to strengthen the cooperation between the Seapac and the Pac in order to ensure the effective implementations of the anti-corruption measures in regions. Now let me move to our last panelist. From the Indonesia Corruption Eradication Commission, Deputy for Information and Data, Mr. Muhammad Hadiana. Mr. Muhammad Hadiana graduated with a bachelor degree in engineering physics from the Bandung Institute of Technology of Indonesia and with a master degree in engineering from the School of Engineering. Before serving in perspective, what are the KPK or the Corruption Eradication Commission of Indonesia as part for the UNGASS and how KPK will carry out the implementation of political declarations. The floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable Dr. Parlemen, MP, Chair of Seapac, Honorable Mr. Ahmad bin Abdullah bin Said Al Mahmud, MP, Chair of GOPEC, Honorable Dr. Puan Maharani, Speaker of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, Honorable Dr. Madani Alisera, moderator of this webinar, Honorable speakers, distinguished delegates from Southeast Asia Parliamentarians Against Corruption, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Corruption Eradication Commission of the Republic of Indonesia, I would like to express my gratitude to the Southeast Asia Parliamentarians Against Corruption, Seapac, and the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia for the excellent preparation for the webinar. Allow me to share my presentation. Okay. Excellencies, allow me to present KPK at a glance. Next slide, please. Fighting corruption, whether through preventive or enforcement measure, is not easy. And the role of effective anti-corruption bodies is paramount to tackle this extraordinary crime. Next slide, please. Indonesian Corruption Eradication Commission, also known as Komisi Pemberantasan Korupsi or KPK, was established in 2002. The Commission's mandate is to eradicate corruption through law enforcement and preventive measures. Our vision is, together with citizens of the Republic of Indonesia, decrease the level of corruption for better Indonesia. We undertake our missions, namely to prevent corruption through system improvement and education, as well as to eradicate corruption in effective and accountable manners. Next slide, please. The KPK has 6 main duties based on Law Number 19 of 2019. The duties are to prevent corruption, coordinate and supervise anti-corruption measures by other agencies, monitor the state administration, investigate and prosecute corruption offenses, and also execute the court verdict. Slide, please. Under the leadership of our current commissioners, the Commission now has 3 anti-corruption strategies, namely public education, along with corruption prevention and law enforcement. Next slide, please. I would like to take this opportunity to present KPK's role on anti-corruption global commitment. Next slide, please. Okay. Excellencies, combating corruption also for international cooperation. Technological advancement and globalization have facilitated cross-border corrupt practices. It is important to foster strategic partnership with other law enforcement agencies, not only in the regions, but also globally. As a state party to both the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNGASS, and United Nations Convention on Transnational Organized Crime, UNOTC, Indonesia plays an active role internationally in enforcement cooperation, knowledge sharing, information exchange, and advocacy of international policies and standards. Indonesia has been participating in several networks, such as the Working Group and Expert Meeting on Asset Recovery and International Cooperation under the UNGASS, APEC Anti-Corruption Transparency Networks, APEC and ET, Anti-Corruption Initiative for Asia Pacific, Asian Parties Against Corruption, and the Economic Crime Agencies Network, or ECAN. Next slide, please. Indonesia has completed the first and the second cycles of UNGASS implementation review. The reviews resulted in 53 recommendations. We are committed to taking and promoting a multi-stakeholder approach to preventing and combating corruption by strengthening our partnership, including with parliamentaries. Next slide. There are 53 recommendations for actions by the UNGASS implementation reviews. 19 recommendations on legalization and law enforcement. 13 recommendations on international cooperation. 14 recommendations on prevention, and 7 recommendations on asset recovery. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I would like to highlight the updates regarding Indonesia's compliance on UNGASS. There are 2 recommendations that can be fulfilled because they aren't in line with our domestic. There are 7 recommendations that we are fully comply. There are 19 recommendations that we are fully comply, and 35 recommendations that we are yet comply. These numbers shows that eradicating corruption requires strong commitment from multi-stakeholders. Slide, please. Moving on, Indonesia has reported an excellent progress in the area of protection of reporting persons, money laundering prevention, national strategy of corruption prevention, beneficial ownership transparency, and mutual legal assistance, or MLA. I would like also to add information that from 2013 to 2012, I would like to add information that from 2013 to 2020, there have been 175 incoming MLA requests in total. During this period, Indonesia received 7 MLA requests related to corruption offenses and 11 MLA requests on money laundering crimes. None of these requests have been refused by the Indonesian authorities to date. Next slide, please. During the UNGASS implementation review, reviewers also acknowledge that Indonesia has established several anti-corruption measures that shown considerable progress in the area of prevention, recovery, and corruption case handling, particularly on bank secrecy and sector. However, amendment of anti-corruption law, mutual assistance law, penal, as well as the establishment of extradition law and asset recovery law are a few outstanding recommendations that require strong commitment and continued efforts from government of Indonesia and Indonesian Parliament. Under the UNGASS obligations, for example, Indonesia is required to criminalize foreign bribery, illicit enrichment, trading in influence, and corruption in the private sector. Next slide, please. Excellencies, on the 2nd to 4th June 2021, there will be the first ever UN General Assembly special session, UNGASS, that will be focused on corruption. The UNGASS was officially set for these dates in UN General Assembly Resolution 74-568 on 31st August 2020. The UNGASS provides an opportunity to shape the global anti-corruption agenda for the next decade by advancing bold and innovative approaches, scaling best practices, and developing new standards and mechanisms. Next slide, please. UNGASS 2021 will provide an opportunity for state parties to reiterate their commitments in combating corruption, both in national and international level, to achieve the common vision of a world free of corruption. Parliament has an important role to improve and strengthen national legal frameworks on anti-corruption, in line with international obligations under UNGASS. Excellencies, to conclude my presentation, I would like to share our belief that it is timely for the ASEAN countries to continue to seek concrete solutions in addressing corruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad Hadiana, who briefly explained on how KPK or Indonesian Corruption Eradication Commissions comply with the UNGASS recommendations, and it would be very valuable for us in during our discussions. And now let we move to we have 3 discussions who have an opportunity to give a comment. First, I would like to give the opportunity to Honorable Datuk Haji Hasanuddin bin Muhammad Yunus, Member of Parliament, and he is also a Seapac Vice President on the first opportunity. Honorable Datuk Haji Hasanuddin, the floor is yours, and let me remind you that the time allocation is 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellency Mr. Ahmed Abdullah, Chair of GOPEC, my brother, Excellency Dr. Fadli Zon, Seapac Chair, panelists, and all participants of this program webinar. Of course, we all want to develop our country into a developed nation, increase foreign direct investment, create more jobs, ensure the citizen well-being, good healthcare, education, and economically prosperous. These are elements that can ensure political stability. Politicians are entrusted with accountability, responsibility as a tenant, not the landlord, and to develop the nation for the well-being of the citizens. Hence, we cannot enrich ourselves, what more through abuse of powers, mismanagement, and corruption. Politicians must lead with example. We must walk the talk. In Malaysia, on conviction for breach of trust, one may face an imprisonment for 20 years and fine and whipping. But being politician, especially being a part of the administration, we do not accept the responsibility as an entrustment that we shall not breach. Hence, we shall believe that the power of being an entity is an instrument, and any breach of trust will be punished in the next life. There is no other punishment except for placement in hell day after. We have developed in holistic and comprehensive National Anti-Corruption Plan, NACP, with help of the MACC, Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, to mitigate the risk. While the NACP is a country plan, the government has directed all organizations to develop risk-based organizational anti-corruption plan, OACP, to identify plan strategies, mitigate the risk. In developing such a national or organization plan, we need to be incredibly transparent. We shall not hide any issue or potential risk of corruption. Only then we can develop an impactful mitigation initiative. Being member of the Seapac, it is disheartening to see our scores and ranks in the recently released Corruption Perception Index, CPI, by Transparency International. Whether we like it or not, whether it is perception or reality, we must accept the outcome of the survey results and work towards improving our scores. Using the CPI, only Singapore scored 85 and placed at the rank of number 3, a rank up. Congratulations to Singapore for being consistent and being among the high achievers in the CPI. While Brunei, also congratulations to Brunei. Brunei is the next best with a score of 60 and rank number 35, maintaining the previous year's achievement. What about Malaysia? Of course, Malaysia score 51, rank 57. Our neighbor, our host, Indonesia, score 37, rank 102. Philippines score 34, rank 115. And Cambodia score 21, rank 160. We in section to Singapore shall not be proud of our scores and rank, but be envious of the achievement of larger countries and the Canadian for their consistently in the CPI. It is time for the Seapac members to develop a corrupt-free nation and place our nation in the global map of CPI high achievers, emulating our members' nation like Singapore. We need to develop our risk profile by performing corruption risk analysis. However, the plan shall not be a mere chef showcase, but the implementation must be monitored and evaluated continuously till all our member nations obtain high score in the CPI. That's why we are going to invite Singapore and Brunei to be of our Seapac member, that we can learn from this both country, and of course the other country. We will learn each other And so far, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Hasanuddin, who briefly exposed the positions of our country in the ASEAN on the state of art of the movement against corruption and the proposal to invite Singapore and Brunei to join the Seapac, because these two countries has a quite high numbers in the CPI index. Now let's move to the second discussion. Let me invite Honorable Auk Damri, a representative from GOPEC Cambodia and member of the Commission of the Investigation and Anti-Corruption, National Assembly of Cambodia. Honorable Damri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to respect the Honorable Chair of GOPEC and Chair of the Seapac, Dr. Paul Lee Song. Today I have great honor and pleasure to address to Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in the Seapac webinar on the Cambodian delegation. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the House representative of the Indonesia. As we all know that the COVID-19 has been threatened our daily life, custom, lifestyle, economic, and society in all countries of the world. But the meeting today would demonstrate our commitment and resilience to this crisis. The National Assembly of the Cambodian legislative body has a strong commitment to combating corruption and anti-corruption institution. ACI was established by anti-corruption law, which was promulgated on 17 April 2010. In this spirit, some like John Sang, Prime Minister of Cambodia, has always mentioned that combating corruption is to make people not to wish to corrupt, cannot corrupt, and they are not corrupt. Second is the legal framework adopted by the Parliamentarians. On 17 April 2010, the anti-corruption laws ACL was promulgated, and the law was based on the Code of Criminal and Criminal Procedure Code. The anti-corruption law has proposed to promote the effectiveness of all forms of service delivery and to strengthen governance and the rule of law, as well as to maintain integrity and justice, which are fundamental for social development and poverty reduction. However, fighting against corruption really need to participate and support from all stakeholders, both from the private and public sector, as well as international corporate. Priority policies and program on anti-corruption are clearly specified in the rectangular strategies, the National Development Plan, Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, and Phase 4. That means all the National Development Plan we are integrating, considering good governance as a core angle, and anti-corruption is one of the priority program. The royal government has supported and endeavored to have anti-corruption law adopt along other relevant law and regulatory for curbing corruption in Cambodia. Meanwhile, the 2012 National Assembly has adopted the public procurement law, which established certain corruption offense and gave the absolute competency to the anti-corruption unit to investigate corruption related case in courts. Recently, in 2020, National Assembly has adopted the new law on the anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorists, AML CFT law 2020. This law aims to increase both scope of the law and general deterrent measure, thereby further preventing money laundering and terrorist financing and combating them in the best possible way. The role of Parliament in fighting against corruption. Institutional frameworks. The Ministry, National Assembly, Senate, Relations and Inspection was created in 1999 to investigate allegations of corruption. Later, the same year, the Anti-Corruption Unit is Council of Ministers was also established with the mandate of developing anti-corruption measures and supervising following up on corruption activity. The National Audit Authority, NAA, was established in 2002, reporting directly to the National Assembly. The National Assembly has created the Commissions of Investigation and Anti-Corruption Committee. Related to the law reinforcement of the SU power, the exclusive power of the SU to investigate corruption offense. We have special privilege of the anti-corruption unit. Privilege of the anti-corruption unit relate to the investigation. Privilege of the anti-corruption unit relate to the freezing individual assets. Privilege of the anti-corruption unit in cooperation with public authority. Protection the complaint, witness and relevant person. Talking about power of the anti-corruption unit. ACU has power to impose all government officials, member of parliament, senator, and the all official nominated by royal decree has to declare their property every 2 years to the ACU. To the anti-corruption law unit. ACU has been installing mailbox at the national constitution, national institution, and also at the main public road to receive complaint from public people related to the corruption activity. Relating the advocacy and activity, we are represent people always disseminate the law in order to promote advocacy of anti-corruption at our conscience area. cooperation with internationals within the international framework, with the parliamentary Parliamentarians, National Assembly has ratified United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNGASS, setting the significant international standard on anti-corruption work and setting up a mechanism to review the implementation of UNGASS for the state party. In conclusions, on behalf of the Cambodian Parliament, I would like to once again express my sincere appreciation to UNGASS and chair and organizations of Vietnam UN General Assembly Special Session Against Corruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Auk Damri, who highlighted the anti-corruption movement in Cambodia, along with the government, the member of parliament, the senators, and the other sectors. And now we move to our second discussion. Mrs. Maria Lourdes Mbesa. She is also a previous Seapac chairs from Timor-Leste. Mrs. Besa, the floor is yours. Mrs. Besa, the floor is yours. Let we move a little bit because the connection is being proceed for Mrs. Besa. Since we still not connected with Mrs. Besa, no, I would like to allow all the participants or our fellow member, our parliamentarians that are present here in the room or in the Zoom meeting to have a discussion with our finalists. Please let me give an opportunity to our friends from the Philippines. Any comment or issue to be raised from the Philippines? The floor is yours.
Good morning, Dr. Fadlizon, Chairman of the Seapac, His Excellency Aman bin Abdullah bin Zayed Al Mahmoud, Speaker of the Shura Council of the State of Qatar, and Chairman of the Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption, or GOPAC, Her Excellency Dr. Puan Maharani, Speaker of the People's Representative Council of the Republic of Indonesia, and to the participants in this special session of the UN General Assembly Against Corruption. As part of the Philippine delegation representing the House of Representatives, I would like to express my gratitude for this opportunity to join my fellow parliamentarians in Southeast Asia to confer on our respective insights on the issue of corruption and how to properly address the same within bounds of our authority. The House of Representatives is part of the legislative branch of the Philippine government, and as such, is actively involved in the passage of laws, including those that promote good governance and public accountability. Owing to the continuous need to monitor the performance of public officials and hold them accountable for their actions, which affect the lives of many Filipinos. The legislative branch of our government has taken a more proactive role relative to good governance by not only crafting or amending laws in response to the evolving needs of the public and real-life issues involving public officials, but also by investigating various issues of public interest with a view to recommending the proper filing of proper actions in court to hold responsible the officials accountable in accordance with law. We are one with our President Rodrigo Roa Duterte on his renewed focus to fight corruption and his avowal to rid the Philippine government with corrupt bureaucrats for the remaining days of his term. We will exercise utmost political resolve to accomplish our mandate and to remain faithful to the trust given to us by our people. There is still so much to learn. There is still so much to learn from our neighboring countries on this aspect of good governance and on various practices successfully applied to combat corruption. This session is a welcome undertaking and will certainly be beneficial to all. Congratulations to the organizer, Southeast Asia Parliamentarians Against Corruption, and the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia for this momentous event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Jesus Crispin Remula from the Philippines. Now, is there any other participants who wants to give any comment or questions? Let me give the opportunity to Honorable Putu Supatma Rudana, who are presenting here. Pak Putu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Mardani Alisera. Honorable Chairperson, distinguished panelists, my fellow members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased and honored to be here today. Thank you for this opportunity. Corruption is indeed a complicated issue and hard to be dealt with only by one side. As a famous proverb say, it takes two to tango. Corrupt practices could continue because there are supply and demand who takes the opportunity to commit the act of corruption for their own gain. We have to stop this. We have to continue to strengthen our cooperation to eliminate this extraordinary crime. Every stakeholder should foster collective action to ensure the success of anti-corruption measures. The upcoming UN General Assembly Against Corruption is a great moment for us to raise our awareness and concern about corruption. It is an opportunity for like-minded organizations to gather and discuss so that corruption can be approached and resolved from multiple angles. As lawmakers, we have an essential role in addressing corruption, such as setting up anti-corruption legislation, among others. Parliamentarians also have the responsibility to expose and denounce corruption and work in partnership with the government, anti-corruption institutions, and other relevant stakeholders. Therefore, parliaments should be engaged and included in the discussion of UN Special Session of the General Assembly Against Corruption 2021. I hope that parliamentarians could be involved and become part of the national delegation for UNGASS 2021 together with the government. Parliaments could raise the exposure and ease the opportunities to follow up within our parliamentary framework all the issues that continuously evolve in the UNGASS. In addition, I have a question for Mr. Francesco Sessi. Francesco Sessi, if I'm not mistaken, right? Is it correct, Mr. Mardani? Mr. Francesco Cecchi. Buongiorno or buonasera. I think he is from Italia. It's Italiano. I have a question. After completion of the assembly, how would the UNGASS political declaration be implemented? And whether the declaration is binding to the states that have ratified the UNCAC. What are the UNODC plans to ensure all states enforce the declaration in their respective countries? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Putu Supatma. Since we still have a problem connection with our third discussion from the Timor-Leste, we would hand it the floors to the panelists first to respond some of the issue that has been raised by our participant members. Let me give to Mr. Cheshi first to respond to some questions and some comment or some explanations on how the anti-corruption movements in here in the Southeast Asia. Mr. Cheshi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, I would like to highlight, to build on the presentation from Mrs. Suhana from the Brunei Anti-Corruption Authority. I want to mention that the ASEAN Pac that she presented is a very important organization as far as we can see from here. They have really helped moving forward some of the issues that are more prominent in the ASEAN region with regard to the fight against corruption. As UNODC, we have worked previously with the Seapac and now with the ASEAN promote corruption, the fight against corruption. We organized, for example, a side event at the Seapac meeting in Singapore on technological advancements against corruption. We also participated to the asset recovery Seapac event in Thailand last year, actually in 2019, and also to the more recent ASEAN Pac event in Vietnam. And I must say that it is important that the issues discussed by the ASEAN Pac also are picked up by the other ASEAN frameworks, in particular ministerial level meetings. I have recently discussed these issues with several colleagues in the countries of the region, and it seems that there's room for improvement when it comes to common policy engagement in ASEAN for the fight against corruption. Of course, ASEAN has, under his security community pillar, a reference to the necessity to address corruption, to enhance security in the region. But I think that relatively rarely we see the issue being picked up at the policy level regionally. So I'm convinced that parliamentarians can play a very important role here to make sure that this becomes a regional issue, an issue that is discussed at the policy level in ASEAN institutions. I think there is quite a need for that. So I would say the Seapac, the Parliamentarians Against Corruption in Southeast Asia, are probably the best place to bring forward some of this policy discussion. With regard to the more substantive aspect of the let's say what we can call the gaps in the region for the fight against corruption, we heard from the colleague from Indonesia about the gaps with regard to the UNGASS review in Indonesia. I think if we look at the various reviews conducted in the region, we can see that there are some common gaps, some gaps that need to be addressed in the various countries. And for example, we mentioned the issue of foreign bribery in Indonesia. I would say foreign bribery is an element of the convention that has to be seriously criminalized in several countries of the region, not only in Indonesia. Indonesia has introduced the liability of legal persons, so the possibility to bring companies to justice, to make companies basically liable for corrupting public officials to get a business advantage, and that has not been the case in many other countries in the ASEAN region. So I don't want to let's say discuss too much on this, but there are various elements of legal regulatory framework that could be picked up by the Seapac as you know, regional issues as well. Also the issue of conflict of interest, the issue of access to information. There are really a variety, a great number of legal regulatory issues that Seapac could really help with moving forward in the region, to establish discussion, to start with a conversation at the policy level in parliament. So I really wish to see this engagement. That would be really important. Now, I wanted to also comment on the that there is the question of what's going on with the results of the UNGASS. So obviously this is a political declaration, and you know, as any political declaration per se is not really binding on the states. The only element in our international framework, as far as the UN Convention, the UN is concerned, is the UN Convention Against Corruption, that has binding measures in it, and the Conference of State Parties is the forum for discussion of these measures. So what I'm sure that will happen is that the political declaration will be picked up then by the Conference of State Parties, and will be discussed in the Conference of State Parties. And then as follow-up, there may be some resolutions out of the COSP, which, you know, they're also not binding, but they constitute a policy framework, a push, an impetus toward the implementation of certain measures. So So in brief, no, the political declaration out of the UNGASS is probably not binding, but it's a very important political document, and we really hope that new laws, new international frameworks will be produced. Now, it's also possible that at the UNGASS, at the special session, groups of states take the commitment to implement certain measures and take the commitment, the responsibility to do it. But that's up to them. For instance, we are talking about the issue of beneficial ownership. I've seen a lot of calls from the civil society, from state parties, from NGOs, towards requesting states to introduce a registry of beneficial ownership. But that's just an example. There's talk of an international anti-corruption court as well. For instance, there's talk of constituting a fund for the victims of corruption acts. So all of this will depend on the will of the states to implement. Anyhow, these are my comments for now, so I give back the floor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francesco. Now I would like to hand it over the session to Hajjah Suhana from Brunei Darussalam. Maybe any comments on the ongoing process in terms of the Southeast Asian governments' fight against corruption? Ms. Hajjah Suhana, the floor is yours. Ms. Hajjah, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Maybe just to add that Brunei Darussalam will continue to be more involved in this programs with the ASEAN Pact, and then also to inform our floor audience here that Brunei will be hosting the annual principals meeting in 2021 this year. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hajjah Suhana. Luckily, we have been connected with our colleagues from Timor-Leste. So I would like to give an opportunity to Mr. Francesco from Timor-Leste. Mr. Francesco, the floor is yours. Can you hear us, Mr. Francesco? The floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Go on.
Good afternoon from Timor-Leste. Actually, this is not Francisco Branco, because Francisco Branco is the president of COPAC chair of Timor-Leste. He is for the moment out of this place because he has some issues to be settled in the parliament. So I'm taking his place to just say a few words regarding GOPAC and Seapac mission in Timor-Leste that has been doing several years until now. So, talking about the GOPAC work in Timor-Leste, since 2016, GOPAC has been going around the country to disseminate information regarding how to fight corruption. In a Timor-Leste context, we found out that fight corruption is not the same as criminalizing acts of corruption. I think it's more of education especially for the young people, because we consider them as leaders, future leaders of the country, to be aware of their duty if they become leaders in the future for the country, to make good use of the money of the people. So in my point of view, because we've been roaming around the country to disseminate information about this issue of corruption, we used to tell the people that corruption is also a virus. So we tell them that fighting corruption is not a job of an institution like the KPK of Indonesia, of CAC, or Commission of Anti-Corruption of Timor-Leste, but is a duty by all citizens of the country. GOPAC Timor-Leste's mission is oriented towards the youth, especially those in the formation stage, starting from the secondary school to the universities, because we consider them that they will be the future leaders of the nation. But as a conclusion to what we have been doing to these target persons in our mission, GOPAC's mission Timor-Leste in fighting corruption, we used to tell them that fighting corruption is a question of conscience. Is a question of conscience, I repeat. So we need not to go until the juridical sector. It's a matter of controlling our conscience. So in conclusion, I would suggest, if ever Seapac comes out with an action plan, I would propose, from Timor-Leste's point of view, to hammer on issues on education for the young people. I should say civic education. Instead of punishing people, we better educate people, especially young people still in the stage of formation, to educate themselves, to control their conscience, because since corruption is a virus, everybody can get contaminated with this virus. Yeah, that's why I would suggest, in a Timor-Leste point of view, that if we want to fight corruption, because each country would have their own way of fighting corruption. But in a Timor-Leste context, we discover that punishing corruptors is not the effective way of fighting corruption. Yep. So in a Timor-Leste point of view, I am going to conclude my intervention. We better educate people, and also one very important thing, we have to ask the intervention of the religious leaders, because Timor-Leste is a religious community, so all different communities, but different religious confessions, but we are religious people. That's why we better ask the intervention of the religious leaders to also involve in this fight of corruption program. If Seapac wants to have one day Timor-Leste with zero corruption, I would suggest we also ask the intervention of religious leaders to fight corruption in our own way. I think this is Timor-Leste's point of view. And I thank you very much for giving me us opportunity to also give a kind of suggestion if ever Seapac comes up with a plan of action for the future. Thank you very much for Timor-Leste.
Thank you very much, Representative from Timor-Leste, which highlighted the importance of education in the movement against corruptions. Now I would hand the floors to Mr. Hadiana. Would you please give a comment on some issue that has been raised in this occasion? Mr. Hadiana, the floor is yours. We still cannot hear your voice.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, I would like to congratulate ASEAN PAC member countries with CPI in 2020. Indonesia CPI itself dropped to 37 and put our rank at 102 in year 2020. We must struggle to increase the CPI of Indonesia this year and years to come. There are many aspects that surround the corruption perception index last year. Among others are stagnating investment, poor law enforcement, stagnating bureaucracy, and service quality. I believe that we can improve the aspects that surrounding CPI by increasing compliance to UNGASS recommendations. And it is the responsibility of all government agencies and Parliament. Parliament has an important role to improve and strengthen national legal framework on anti-corruption based on UNGASS recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hadiana. We are also having some comment on and questions from the audience, but due to time constraint, we are really sorry not to respond this time, but hopefully on the next sessions, we will have plenty of time to respond all to those all questions and comment that has been given to us from the public which engage with this webinar series. Ladies and gentlemen, member of parliaments, delegates, and all the participants, through our dynamic conversation, we realized that addressing corruption is hardly done alone. We need to collaborate and cooperate. So the problem of corruption can be approached from various perspectives, from education to law, from non-government organization to the government itself, and all of the sectors, and produce more comprehensive solutions. I am really grateful to moderate these sessions, and now I will give the floor to the Master of Ceremony, Mbak Rosita.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are now coming to the end of this webinar. To all speakers and moderator, thank you very much for this valuable discussion. And we will now have a wrap-up and closing remarks by Honorable President of Seapac, Dr. Fadlizon, please.
Thank you very much. Honorable members of Parliament, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon us all. A very good afternoon. We have come to the end of our discussion. It is one of the most fruitful and deliberative webinars, although we are limited in terms of a physical connection. Thank you to all parliamentarians, GOPAC, Seapac, national chapters for your participation and contribution during the discussion, during this webinar, and especially I thank all the panelists for their cooperation and readiness to share with us your concern. Also to our moderator, Honorable Mr. Mardani Alisera, the UNODC Regional Office for elaborating into details of what is the UNGASS 2021, its agenda, its potential outcome, and share to us where we can take part in the long run. Mr. Chesi, thank you. Seapac is hoping that we can establish more partnership for future actions, programs, and agendas. The Indonesian Corruption Eradication Commission, KPK or CEC, for sharing your concern and priorities, and let us hope that Seapac and GoPac Indonesia National Chapter can address these concerns and others within the region. I promise you that this will not be our only encounter. There will be more to come. And also thank you very much for Dr. Hajah Suhana from ASEAN PAC for your valuable contribution. For all participants, I do hope that we can devise actions to follow up on this webinar. We can explore means to deliver parliamentary contribution on the agenda, and in addition to that, we can also probably urge to be included as a national delegation to the UNGASS, and should the situation allow us to travel for that meeting. This webinar is a starting point for future endeavors of Seapac, its executives and members, and parliamentarians as a whole for taking concrete actions to combat corruption and promote good governance. So stay safe, stay healthy, and please strictly follow the health protocols. Let us hope the pandemic soon be over. And I hope after this webinar, more members of parliament from Southeast Asia could join us in Seapac, and more information can be found in cpac.dpr.go.id. So join us, be our ally. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fadlizon. And we would like to invite all speakers, moderator, and all participants to join together for a photo session. To excellencies and distinguished participants who are tuning in to this virtual event, please turn your cameras on. Thank you. We will have a photo session all together. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will have two photo sessions. The first one will be the formal one with a formal pose, and the second one with your hands raised up and wave together. So, ready? Photographers ready also? For the first photo, formal pose, on my count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay? Second photo session, please raise up your hands and wave a little bit on my count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are now concluding this virtual event. Our gratitude to all of you for your participation in this important webinar. Thank you and see you again.
Yang sekarang yang diundang ke depan. Yang sekarang diundang ke depan.
Kepada Bapak Ibu sekalian yang hadir di ruang ballroom ini, mohon untuk berfoto bersama lagi. Dipersilahkan untuk menuju ke backdrop, ke depan backdrop untuk berfoto bersama. Kami persilakan, silakan Bapak Fadlizon beserta semua partisipan, anggota BKSAP untuk menuju ke depan backdrop. Kita akan berfoto bersama.
Boleh juga. Tapi penuh nggak? Kita lihat penuh ya. Nggak muat ya gimana?